technology
You don't need the Unreal Engine 5 in your game to make it stand out. Not at all, bro. Like, and then a lot of people think like, oh, the better graphics, the better your game stand out. Like, shut the Why don't you upgrade to Unreal Engine 5?
Hey guys, Raymond here, and I've been developing my indie game, Project Feline, in Unreal Engine 4. Ew, Unreal 4, what is that?
No way.
That's disgusting. Why aren't you using the latest and greatest Unreal 5 with all the exciting rendering, cool technology stuff? And look, I know this is a hot take, but I am not upgrading to Unreal 5. Everyone tells me it's easy, but if my game dev journey has taught me anything, is that nothing is ever as simple as just clicking a button. Because every time I've tried to upgrade my project, even between minor versions of Unreal 4, it always breaks something every time. The most severe instance of this happening was when I upgraded between like Unreal 4.26 to 2.7, and in doing so, I broke Gabby's wall run, like the core mechanic of my game. After a week of banging my head against the wall and trying to solve it, I figured out what it was. Gabby's wall run casts a zero distance sphere trace to detect walls and use for her wall run. But in this new update, Epic had changed it so that casts with a distance of 0 would get ignored. And this wasn't in the patch notes or anything, so I had to figure it out by accident. Now,
I love how he talks about it as like, yeah, it wasn't on the patch notes. Like he's playing a game of his own. But he's actually making the game. Yeah, I've heard that, like, while Unreal Engine, I gotta say, is literally, for me, the best engine ever made to date. It's also so hard to program on it. It apparently is really, really difficult to make anything on Unreal Engine.
This might seem innocuous, and this isn't Epic's fault. This is just par for the course when you update any software in an existing project.
It ain't their
with
fault.
enough of these little instances happening, it adds up and costs time. And at some point you have to ask yourself if the investment in time in fixing these little issues is worth having the latest version of the software.
Only if you're making like
a AAA. In my case, it wasn't worth it, because all of the new features they were adding to the latest version weren't features I was actually going to use. I was just upgrading for the peace of mind of knowing I was using the latest version. And this is all just from upgrading.
You can clearly see this game wouldn't
need
it.
4. Could you imagine how much more complicated
Not
it
worth
could get
it.
upgrading from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5? But Raymond, what about all the new features? What about Nanite and Lumen and MetaHuman and all this epic cool rendering stuff that's going to make your game look next gen and cutting edge? You're going to miss out. I don't care, because my game doesn't need it. I'm making an anime style game, okay? I don't need the latest cutting edge graphical fidelity. And I think wanting those cutting edge effects without a plan or an intention to actually use them is not a good enough reason to upgrade. Now sure, I could upgrade the engine anyway, get some quality of life improvements, and turn off or just not use all of these cutting edge effects. But this still bears a cost insofar as overhead. You know, just because those features are turned off doesn't mean they don't have an impact. Even just running the Unreal 5 editor on my machine is a lot more demanding to run than the Unreal 4 editor. And if the performance hit in even the test scene is this large, just with all the overhead of the new features, I can only imagine how much worse it would be for the customer. I could be wrong, but do I want to invest the time to find out, or do I want to just continue on as I've been without problems? From a gamer's point of view, I just don't see the point in raising the minimum specs for my game for no reason. And sure, these are not bad features, but I feel like most of the time when people tell me about them, they're just charmed by the novelty. I've observed this behavior a lot in students who've been typically inclined to get super hyped and excited about the latest engine feature or the new latest update in whatever software it was, but a lot of the time they would never end up actually doing anything with it. You know, they'd watch a few tutorials on it, they get pretty excited, but the novelty wears off pretty quickly when they notice the unintended consequences of some new feature.
It becomes a problem when you realize that you gotta work. It's cool thinking about it, but when you actually have to do it, that's the problem.
You know, I've unironically seen people champion that, oh guys, we don't have to do retopology anymore. We can just chuck in a high poly sculpt with nanite with no consequences.
Wow.
But I don't know, in my experience, there is always some trade-off, whether it's immediate or not. And when the bill comes due, that's when your motivation gets challenged. You realize that this new feature isn't the silver bullet you thought it was. You realize that just adding Lumen and nanite to your game doesn't put you on the same level as Crysis. And then you sit there waiting until the next new feature comes along, and maybe that'll be the new silver bullet this time. And then the cycle just repeats anew. And I'm not saying any new feature is bad and that modern rendering is bad. There are some good games out there that have leveraged these. But these aren't good
Yeah,
games
for
because
sure.
of their cutting-edge graphics.
Like the best game of 2024, Black Myth will come.
Technology is merely one ingredient, and I think the key ingredient to these cases is the people making it. I get the temptation of wanting to use the latest cutting-edge tools to be just like them, but everyone is going to be doing that, so just using the latest thing isn't good enough because you won't stand out. To use it in such a way where you stand out requires that you use the technology deliberately.
You don't need the Unreal Engine 5 in your game to make it stand out. Not at all, bro. Like, and a lot of people think like, oh, the better graphics, the better you're gonna stand out. Like, shut the f***. That's not how it works. Look at Among Us. Look at Among Us.
Deliberately with intent.
And that's one of many examples.
This requires more than novel technology, but strong direction. And getting a scene to look good on purpose, even when using primitive techniques, is really hard to do. If you can't even do that with the basics, then when given anything more, you will be overwhelmed by the gamut of what you have to do with all these settings and sliders to get it to look good the way you want. And I think for most of us, that's just too much to handle. I think it's only the very exceptional that can wield all of that technology and make it look timeless. And I know this just from my experience with Unreal 4. You know, that still ships with a lot of modern rendering effects enabled by default that I didn't know how to use properly. I was annoyed that my game looked more smeary and desaturated and washed out than I wanted it to, and my ultimate solution was to turn
I like that he put gameplay footage is not final and subject to change because
all of those effects
you
off.
can see a
turn
line.
off the color grading, the tone mapping, the motion blur, the TAA, the bloom,
that looks... Damn, is this why Fortnite anime skins look so bad? Holy fuck, I might actually have figured it out. You know, like in Fortnite there's anime skins and they look like the bottom more like than the top. Maybe this is why, because of Unreal Engine 5.
everything, so that I could have full
It looks
control
sad
over the
for
frame.
real.
And sure, my game might not look cutting edge, but I didn't want it to anyway, and now it looks more like the way I want it to look. But I think broadly speaking, there is this real danger of us developers relying on cutting edge and novel technology as a crutch, because we are insecure that our own work lacks merit. And trying to cover that insecurity up with novelty and spectacle, it'll trick people immediately into thinking that your game is slick. You'll get a few Reddit upvotes for it. It'll charm people for a week. But once it comes out in the wash, when time passes and the novelty wears off, all that's left behind is the game's true merits. And if there's nothing there beyond novelty, it will be forgotten. Me personally, I have a vision in my head.
I mean, there's a chance
it
will be forgotten either way.
And UE5, Nanite, Lumen, Metahuman, DLSS, whatever, is not part of that vision. If I'm at the stage where I need to rely on those to make a good game, leaning only on the merit of novelty, then I've lost.
That's a move.
And if you have a mission, if you have a project you gotta do, and you constantly have the latest Unreal 5 feature showcase in your Twitter feed, it costs your time and attention, which is limited. And unless you have complete confidence in your project, and you have the courage to say no to things, then you are going to be constantly tempted because you're going to have this insecurity that, oh, well, maybe I do need this feature, and maybe I will learn this thing and add it. All that mental energy and time you're spending keeping up with the epic games, that's
so crazy. Like the level of marketing that we have nowadays, that even like people like this have like, they have created their own target audience for things to be sold and marketable in like scummy ways like that, to make them like fall into the trap of like the new thing when it's not necessarily like needed.
It's like mental energy you could have spent actually working on your game. And again, don't get me wrong, this technology's good, but I think it's only good insofar as that you actually have a need to use it and it solves a problem you actually have in your project. Which, in my case, as far as I can tell, Unreal 4 might actually be a bit overkill for my game. I mean, I'm only here for the visual scripting and tools, and I don't see how Unreal 5 would solve any new problems that I couldn't already solve with Unreal 4.
Yeah, no, for sure, and from seeing the game for a little bit, it looks like he could perfectly have made this game in Unity. And it would have been fine.
And for all those reasons, that's why I've stuck with Unreal 4, and will continue to stick with Unreal 4. Unless there's some new feature that comes out that actually solves a problem in my project and provides value beyond novelty. But until then, I just don't care. So I'm not saying don't use UE5 or that it's a bad engine. These are just my personal reasons why I'm not using it. And if you're an aspiring dev and you're just getting into things, don't stress out too much over like what game engine to use. I know there's a bit of a console war mentality going on with it. But honestly, man, I don't think there is an objective best game engine. Only the best engine for you. And the best engine for me is Unreal 4. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting my work through Patreon, buying some Project Feline merch, or wishlisting Project Feline on Steam. Or just do all of those, that'd be awesome. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to it and I'll see you in the next one.
I think more than saying that for him is the best engine, I think what he tries to say is that it's better for his game that he is making right now. While Unreal Engine 5 will not be needed for a lot of games, I feel like it could improve many other games and it could make better games depending on what you're looking for. Like Crysis, for example, I know so little about it, but I keep hearing that people are like, that was like peak graphics. When people think of graphics, the Crysis usually always comes in. Sure, graphics are not very important, but it can also really shape a narrative. An environmental one, at least. It helps. So yeah, I think he tries to be more like it for his game right now. Unreal Engine 5 is completely useless, and he's right. But I also feel like Unreal Engine it's really good and it could help a lot of other games. Cool video though.